We're talking recycling today with Kari Parcell, the Cooperative Extension Waste Reduction Manager, Coordinator,
Manager, it all works.
all sorts of different titles there, but really what you do is you try to make sure that Cape Cod is recycling smart.
Yes, we want to recycle smart, we want to recycle clean, and we want quality recycling markets.
Right. So you had a pilot program this year that seemed to garner a lot of interest, and from my understanding, actually saved a lot of plastic out of the oceans and everywhere else. Tell us a little bit about how the boat shrink wrap program went.
Yeah, so we wrapped up on June 30th. It was about a 9-week program. It was accessible to all Cape towns and communities, as well as harbor masters, boatyards, marinas, etc. And so in that 9 weeks, we recycled about 3.6 tons of boat shrink wrap. And if you remember, boat shrink wrap, when you take it off of the average boat, it weighs about 15 pounds. We talked about that big burrito wrapped in a bow, no strings, no wires, stuff like that. And so that's the equivalent of about 450 plus boats. Bourne actually collected the most, maybe just an accessible area with the Upper Cape, and then we had Dennis and Eastham who also participated. Not to forget that Sea Grant Woods Hole paid for this,
Right.
So services are not free, but we allowed it to be free for our residents and again boat owners that originate on Cape Cod. And then we had AmeriCorps volunteers, and of course the Extension Department, aka and myself, helped, and we all put our efforts together, and it was a great 9 weeks. Very
Right.
cool.
And talk a little bit about that plastic. It's a little different than what we normally consider, our old milk bottles or whatever we throw
Right.
away in our plastics. That plastic can break down and get everywhere, can it?
Yeah, so when you're talking about plastics in general, plastics don't really ever sort of biodegrade or disintegrate.
Right.
They just become like smaller and smaller and smaller nanoplastics. And they get into our drinking water, they get into the, our food supplies because they go into the animals that absorb them, and then we eat those animals, and they even fly out through the air, which is quite interesting. But boat shrink wrap is a number 6 plastic for the most part, because you have to use, there's all these chemicals in there that when you heat it up, it sort of expands, and then as it cools, it shrinks, and that's what makes it a pretty decent weather retardant as far as boats go. It protects it. If you do it correctly when you're cutting it per season, you can actually reuse that up to 3 years, because the compounds do break down as you reheat and shrink and reheat and shrink. But you can use it up to about 3 seasons if you want to. Tarps and covered sheds and stuff work just as well. But we all know the weather here on the Cape, and if you're storing your boats here, you want to protect that investment. So it is. It's a highly chemicalized, thick, crazy plastic that can be hard to recycle if there's no market for it. Luckily, we found a market and we found a vendor, and so it all sort of came together. This wasn't our first year, but it was the first year with an expansion outside of a location in Woods Hole at the oceanographic facility, and so it made it more accessible and a little bit more widely known that this was available to the residents and boat owners of Cape. So it was awesome.
Fantastic. And there's always still talk. We're just going to talk smart recycling. Contaminated loads are still out there, aren't they?
They are. The Cape is really pretty good. I mean, residents are pretty cognizant and aware. There are challenges to recycling, just kind of like anything. And as everybody knows, we're all talking about it. Is things really getting recycled? Do things go into our landfills? Are they going to our waste to energy facilities? And the short answer is yes, it can, but not purposefully. It's mostly because we're not qualityizing our loads. We're sort of, quantity, with in doubt, put it in the bin, someone else will sort it out, right? And that's what we've been doing for 30 years. And it's, we want it to be convenient, we want it to be easy, but it needs to be right, it needs to be smart. And the way that the markets are is, if you think of your toter or a bin that you put all your recycling in, if you put too much contaminants in it, it really becomes a load of trash with recycling in it, not recycling with trash in it. So we kind of have to visualize that. Right. And when you're thinking about the recycling systems for our state, they go through conveyor belts and optics and blowers and magnets, and human hands are touching this. And so if we're not putting the right things in there, you're really, making it a worker safety issue, you're making it a production issue, and you're making it, a processing, sorting, baling issue, because if you have, coat hangers or Christmas lights or baby dolls or diapers or food waste, plastic bags are the #1 contaminant, and they tangle up in that, that system for separation, and that's really our big problem. So it's really sort of knowing what's recyclable versus, you know, somebody else will take care of it for us. We really need to take accountability for our own ability to put the right things in that bin.
Right. And there is a website that helps with that. It has a Recyclepedia, Recycle Smart.
recyclesmartma.org.
Right.
And it does, right on the homepage, there's a little widget called the Recyclepedia, and you can type in, you know, various items. I believe there's a list more of 400 strong. And you can type in car bumper, and it'll probably tell you to put it in the scrap metal at your transfer station or having to take it to a scrap metal pile. Right. If it says Christmas lights, during the season, most of our transfer stations put out barrels specific to Christmas lights so they can take it to a metal sorter. So there's all different things. I mean, black plastics don't get read by our optic readers, and so black plastics, like the Chinese bottoms of the to-go containers, are not recyclable because they're not being read, so they're just going into the resin anyway. And so it begs a larger question about, you know, extended producer responsibility and our manufacturers and processors of these particular plastics for our you know, to-go containers, etc. But, you know, for now, the Cape is doing a really nice job.
Right. And one of the last things we would kind of want to touch on is that we now have the ability to recycle our own glass here on Cape Cod. This is like super exciting, really cool technology. It's going to save towns who bring loads to this recycler. Tell us what it is.
Yeah, so we call it processed glass aggregate, and really what it is, it's recyclable glass. So your mayonnaise jars, your jelly jars, your jam jars, put the lid back on, make sure they're not, you know, they don't have to be super clean, don't waste a ton of water cleaning it out, but nice and clean. Your deposit bottles, your wine bottles, things like that. And you don't want tempered glass like windshields, you don't want mirrors in there, you know, photo frame glass, that sort of stuff that's not recyclable. But your recyclable glass in general, you can clean it, cap it, and then take it to your transfer station. And there's 5 towns that source separate their glass from the rest of the commingled, which would be your plastics and tin and aluminum. And what they do is they take it to the town of Dennis, which received a grant through DEP. And they have a big lot where they tip the glass, and it's away from the public because we need to be safe. Okay. And at 600 tons, which currently we're at 540, we have a third-party vendor that comes in, and they actually crush it down to a 3/8 minus, and it's used for roadway, building, construction, and drainage projects. So if you buy a glass container on the Cape, and then you consume, you know, eat whatever was within it, you clean it up, and you take it to one of those 5 transfer stations, it's actually going to be reused here on those projects. And so it's quite fascinating, and it's a really great regional program, and that's what we're working on. With boat shrink wrap, it's regional. With glass, it's regional. We have, you know, mattress recycling, that's regional. We have latex paint, that's regional. And so these are the big things that we're working on as a group, as a community, as Cape, that we can work on together and really sort of give access to folks for that proper recycling and to find those streams and uses for it.
This is fantastic. The Barnstable is participating in this program with the glass.
They are.
So it's really important, again, to look at what you're putting in your recycling. So no ceramic dishes, no porcelain.
Nope.
It's really literally just...
no drinking glasses. You know, you don't want to put any vases or anything like that in there. Again, it's recyclable glass. So pickle jars, mayonnaise jars, you know, olive jars, those types of things, you know, basically food and beverage. Think of it as food and beverage. And again, with in doubt, you know, you can go to recyclesmartma.org, type it in, and it'll tell you what to do with it. So it's easy peasy. We're trying our best to just make it right there, easy peasy for you.
Right, but we're going to actually probably reduce, reuse, recycle, right?
Yes, I mean, you know, we went from 3 R's, we actually have 9 now. We have 9 R's, but I'm not going to bore you with them nor overwhelm anybody with them. But really, it's kind of like a refuse, reduce, you know, we want to, you know, I have a mason jar at home that somebody gave me some flowers in, and I cleaned it out very thoroughly, and I use it as a drinking jar now. So, you know, and sometimes it's a vase, sometimes I drink out of it. I'm not telling you to do that. However, you know, it's something that I option out with that particular, you know, mason jar instead of, you know, tossing it. But I do. I kind of go back and forth between, if I have flowers in my house, it's my vase, and if I don't, it's my drinking glass.
There you go. Excellent.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, Kari.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.